Is Oxnard City Hall truthful about how they spend your money? What you're about to see is going to make you angry. In this video, I'll give you proof of City Hall's systemic mismanagement using the city's own documents that reveal how the city deliberately misclassifies expenses to hide their true nature, overcharges residents for property tax assessments, and effectively siphons money into the general fund by billing general fund expenses to accounts that are dedicated for other purposes. Oxnard has a number of landscape maintenance districts, LMDs. Property owners in the LMDs pay extra assessments on their property tax bill each year. For that money, the city of Oxnard is supposed to provide special benefits, such as landscaping maintained at a higher level than the areas which are not in landscape maintenance districts. Let's dig into some of the details of how your money is being managed by the city. In May or June of each year, the City Council votes to set the amount each district will pay for the next fiscal year. By state law, each year a document like this, called an engineer's report, has to be prepared for each one of the LMDs showing the plans and costs for that district for the next year. Here's the budget in the engineer's report for fiscal year 1920 for LMD 41, named Pacific Cove. See here, this district is fund number 163 in the city's accounting system. This budget was produced by one of the city's vendors, NBS. They say the budget is based on the actual expenses from the prior year, so if we could see the detailed actual expending, it ought to look pretty similar to this budget. The expense section has three parts, with the first called direct expenses. The line called contractor maintenance costs is supposed to pay for private companies that are awarded contracts to do things like mow the grass and trim the trees. Then you see budgets for the utility costs like electricity to run sprinklers or power any lighting, and water for the landscaping. This next section is administrative overhead expenses. This is what the city charges your district for city employees or contractors to oversee your district. They execute contracts with the landscapers, monitor their performance, do the accounting, prepare the annual budgets, etc. Next, we see allowances for expenses that don't occur every month but are one-time costs, like fixing a broken sprinkler, or special projects would be like replacing dead plants. These things should still be directly related to working on the landscaping and lighting in the district, so I'm not sure why they don't list them with the direct expenses above. Here's the county fee to collect the funds for the city on the property tax bills. That's really another type of administrative cost. The next section of the budget shows the revenues from sources other than your property tax levy, like any contributions made by the city's general fund, or leftover funds from past budget years in your district. Finally, they subtract to calculate how much the 120 houses in this district need to pay on their property tax bills next year so that the budgeted revenues will equal the budgeted expenses. Residents have obtained from the city this report of the detailed transactions for the LMDs to compare it to the budgets for the same year. Let's look at how the money was actually spent. Here we have the detailed transactions for electric utility expenses for that year in LMD number 41. This section spans more than one page, and there's more than one year here, so I positioned it so you can see all of this fiscal year 20 together. You see monthly charges from SoCal Edison, shown as SCE billing. And if you were to add up all the SoCal Edison entries for the year, it's $5,609.72. The electric budget was $6,676, so that's under budget by $1,066.28. But there's another entry here that doesn't look like the others. What is this? At the end of the fiscal year, the city posted a charge here under electric utility expenses for actual staff charges. Charges for staff time are an administrative expense, and this is in the budget category for direct electric utility expenses. The amount of the charge is exactly how much was left unused in the electric budget. That doesn't look right. Looking back at the budget, actual staff charges sounds like it ought to be in this budget line for direct staff overhead costs. And it has a budget of $3,038, but also notice that $513 of city general overhead 2 lines below is the same account number for a total of $3,551 budgeted for that account. So what did charges to that account look like? Here it is, and again, there's that same description of actual staff charges in this category for direct staff overhead costs. So our hunch was correct. That's the description for direct staff overhead. So why are there also actual staff charges categorized as electric utility expense? Well, remember the budget for direct staff overhead costs was only $3,551 for the year we're looking at. And here in the transaction amount column, they booked exactly the budget limit of $3,551 for that year. But remember that budgets are just projections, so that's odd in itself that at the end of the year, the total actual staff time spent would match the budget projections so precisely. But the electric budget hadn't been used up, and there was still exactly $1,066.28 left over in that budget, and that is exactly how much in staff charges were booked there, just enough to precisely use up the budget for that category to the penny. So it appears that they overran the budget for direct staff charges and started looking for other places to hide it. They just pretended some of it was electric utility charges, though it wasn't. Taking a quick peek back at the budget for this LMD, the category for direct expenses had a footnote number 2, which said these direct expenses are, quote, contractor maintenance costs, utilities, and incidental costs directly related to the maintenance and replacement of the improvements, end quote. From that description, there should not be any direct staff charges in that category at all. We're going to poke around and see whether more actual staff charges are hidden elsewhere in this LMD's expenses. Here's another $53.54 in the budget category for on-call services and special projects. That amount is conveniently, again, the precise amount unused in that budget category for the year, exactly to the penny. There's that same $1,066.28 we already saw in the electric expenses to use up the rest of that budget. And then here's another $733.80 in the water utility expenses. Again, not because it was for water, but seemingly because there was enough room left in the water budget to put the remaining balance of the staff charges they needed to hide somewhere. So with a budget of $3,551 for the overhead costs in those two lines with account numbers ending in 8451, this district was charged $5,404.62, which is a 52% overrun in that budget category, with the extra spread among the other budget lines, misclassified as other types of expenses to disguise their true nature. And the numbers for the next year's budget were based on the misclassifications from the year we're looking at, when it should have instead shown higher administrative costs and lower direct costs. I looked at the line for the account ending in 8205 for outside administration services, non-city staff. I would expect that budget of $1,047 to be for something like the vendor, NBS, who created this budget document. Oddly, I didn't find that any itemized expenses were charged under that account for that LMD that year. The vendor did do the work, so it makes you wonder where it was booked. I've reviewed the details on 247 invoices from this vendor, compared them to how the city booked them, and 174 of them were charged to the wrong accounts. 70% error rates do not inspire my confidence in the city's bookkeeping. But here's a $5,000 bill from that same company for public engagement with the LMDs. NBS is a consultant, and their work is administrative in nature. They don't mow grass or trim trees, yet this is booked under the budget category, which budget footnote 2 said was for costs directly related to maintenance and replacement of the improvements. I'm well acquainted with the NBS public engagement project. This consultant has meetings with LMD residents and tries to talk them into paying even higher Melrose taxes instead. I've been to those meetings, and they are not mowing any grass in your LMD, yet this cost is booked as though they were. That's not right. That shouldn't even be charged to the LMD at all, but even if the city thinks the LMD should pay for it, it's an administrative type cost, not a direct maintenance expense that should be charged to this account. It would take a long time to show you this for every one of the LMDs, but the examples of misclassification of expenses in LMD number 41 is not just a rare anomaly. It happened in many of the LMDs. We saw almost $2,000 of extra administrative type costs were instead booked in direct maintenance and electric utility costs and water utility costs and on-call services, special projects. We saw a $5,000 bill from a contractor trying to persuade residents to pay Melrose taxes was also misclassified under direct maintenance costs, as though they were mowing the grass. In other words, they're spending much more on administrative type costs than they tell you, and they're spending less on actual landscaping work than they tell you. Effectively, their accounting is a lie, which results in transferring your landscaping money to the city's general slush fund in the form of excess administrative fees. Take a look here at the budget for my LMD, number 43, for the same year. They charge $60,000 for special projects. What's that? Well, another page in the engineer's report lists the special projects. For LMD, it says some of the $60,000 is for plant material and lighting, but there's $30,000 for solar clocks and lighting, plus $15,000 for replacing benches and trash cans. Here in the next year's budget for my LMD, the city charged us another $50,000 of special projects, including another $10,000 for replacing benches and trash cans. The expenditures for that should be in the expense category ending in 8229 for special projects. So let's look at what they spent. This report only covers 1.75 years of those 2 budget years, but after charging us $110,000, only $30,000 has been billed to the special project account. And you're about to see that about 2/3 of that spending shouldn't be charged here at all. This line is for over $7,900 of administrative staff charges, not special project work on the landscaping. But it is excess administration hidden here, just like the hidden entries we saw for LMD number 41 earlier. We'll talk about this other $12,000 charge in just a minute. So what little work they did here is landscaping projects according to the invoices. There are no solar clock or solar lighting project expenses here. There are no bench and trash can replacements here. I walked down our greenbelt and confirmed the benches and trash cans have not been replaced. The city charges us increased property tax assessments for projects which were never actually done. And our annual assessment keeps climbing. 2 years ago, in fiscal year 1920, it was just under $63,000. Then last fiscal year, it was $91,000. But this year, it's now just under $114,000, though our fund has a huge leftover fund balance from past years and the direct costs have not increased much. Of the $30,000 of special project charges to LMD number 43, one invoice that we saw was for $12,421.50 for sidewalk grinding in 507 locations that mostly should not have been billed to this LMD at all. Here's the map showing what LMD number 43 pays for, and all the houses and apartments within this dotted line outer boundary pay the LMD assessment. But the money they pay is supposed to be used to maintain only the area that you see color-coded here, with red indicating landscape and blue indicating hardscape like sidewalks. That color-coded area is a green belt. It's a wide walking path. It's got trees and grass on the side. Only that area is maintained by LMD funds, and the LMD is not responsible for the landscaping or the sidewalk in front of any of these houses or on the outer perimeters of the neighborhood. Attached to that $12,000 invoice is a listing of the 507 locations where they did sidewalk grinding. Here in part of the listing are 3 entries that say almost 100 of those locations were within the greenbelt. But look at all these other locations. The addresses on Lombard Street and other streets are not fronting the greenbelt area. Another page shows more addresses on Wankel, Williams, Rivera Way, Rivera Drive. Those are not the greenbelt. So going back to the map, the locations shown on the invoice are mostly in these purple circled areas on the perimeter of the neighborhood where the city's general fund should be paying for maintenance, or some of these interior areas which, because these happen to be private streets, they're probably either HOA or private party responsibility. These are not the areas that the LMD is supposed to maintain according to this map, yet the LMD was billed for the work done there. Of the 197 LMD invoices I've reviewed so far for on-call services or special projects, 8 of them, about 4%, were just billed to the wrong LMD. Here's an example of an invoice for tree trimming, and the attached listing of all the locations are within the boundaries of LMD number 32. But the city instead booked this invoice to make LMD number 28 pay for it. Or here's an example of a receipt which was billed to an LMD and was booked as a supplies expense. But these are not supplies like tree fertilizer or insect treatment, which get routinely used up and replaced. These are tools which can be used for many years. The contractors doing the direct LMD work should be using their own tools. The LMDs don't provide on-site storage for tools, and someone somewhere has possession of and benefit from these tools, though the LMD was made to pay for them instead of whoever possesses them now. There are issues in the revenue portion of the budgets as well, because the LMD budgets don't give the LMDs credit for all of their revenue sources. The itemized account activity report also shows the revenue categories. For example, here in LMD number 42, this district had enough cash accumulated from past years in their fund balance to earn over $17,000 of interest income in the fiscal year 1920. That's a lot of money. But when you look at that LMD's budget for the same year, there was no anticipated interest income at all, not a penny. If another $17,000 of interest revenue had been listed here, it would have more than covered the $9,850 total levy that they were charged on their property tax bills. It could have been zeroed out. But those residents were not given credit for all of their revenues. Many of the LMDs earn interest income, but it's not used to lower their assessments, even though the law governing the LMDs says that the budget should include these other revenue sources. Leaving the interest income out of the budget allows them to increase your levy for a non-existent shortfall. I have many more examples, but I think you get the idea. There is systemic mismanagement of our LMD funds. They hide how they actually spent the money. They overspend on administrative costs, leaving less money to do the actual work. They charge you too much. They make you pay for someone else's expenses. Do you feel like you're getting the special benefit value for what you pay? Bookkeeping games with the LMDs just increase the assessments on your property tax bill to divert money to the general fund. The city will keep doing this to us until we assert ourselves. But if we work together, we can actually stop this. If you want to help us remove this LMD assessment from your property tax bill, please contact us today.